Welcome to the Edges of Lean. I'm Bella Engelbach, and in this podcast we explore the human and creative side of lean thinking, unusual places where lean thinking is practiced. We meet people who are practicing continuous improvement in many different flavors and styles. So come along with me on a journey to the edges of lean. Episode 17, Continuous Improvement in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. Few of us win world championships. It takes talent, skill, and extraordinary dedication to become a world champion in anything, in any sport. Can you imagine becoming a world champion while also excelling at a full-time job? My guest is Shanti Abelha, who has an inspiring story to tell about how she did just that and how lean thinking was part of her journey. Shanti Abelha is a 5-time Brazilian Jiu Jitsu world champion, and she owns her own Jiu Jitsu academy, as well as functioning as head of lean in WS Audiology, a market leader in hearing aids for the EMEA region. Based in Copenhagen, Denmark, she holds a Master of Science in Engineering, a coaching management certification in Lean Six Sigma Black Belt. Through her 15 years of working with Lean, she specialized in coaching senior management groups and leaders towards better performance by demystifying Lean tools on the shop floor and always pushing for the one small action that will make an immediate difference tomorrow. Shanti Abelha, welcome to the Edges of Lean.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me and having me. I've been very excited for this last few weeks.
Oh, that's great. I'm excited to have you. Shanti, can you tell us about you? About how did you become a lean facilitator, a lean leader?
So my lean journey, and actually my Brazilian Jiu Jitsu journey, which we'll also touch upon, they've been following in parallel and took off at more or less the same time. At some point during my university studies, where I was doing engineering in the field of biotechnology and getting into some research and understanding about what research took, but also how long it took, I had this idea of like, there has to be a better way to do this. There has to be a way to improve on these research processes because this is just too long, right? So that was, and then I ended up university-wise, then kind of wandering over. I didn't change majors because the setup is different here in Denmark, but I wandered over to focus more on production management and got into lean that way. And I was like, this makes sense. And at the same time, I was also starting to compete in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu while I was studying. And when I finished my studies, I continued to compete in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu for about 10, 11 years at a fairly high level. And I also was lucky enough to land my first job as like an internal lean consultant in one of Denmark's largest companies, and actually landed it working in their development area. So I got to do lean, not in production, but right off the bat, got to do lean in development, which back then and even partially now was not the most developed. And you came and talked to these scientists about standardization, and they just looked at you and they were like, "But we're doing development. We can't standardize processes here. This is development." So that's how it all started. And since then, work-wise, I have always had something to do with lean in the organizations I've been in different roles. First as internal lean consultant, then I became a manager. Then I also jumped back into a coach consultant role across a larger part of the organization. And then especially in the last 5 years, have been working heavily with supporting senior management groups with strategy deployment. But at the same time, as much as strategy deployment is fine from the top, if you don't get the bottom layer and go down and go to Gemba and see what's doing and working and help help supervisors and first line managers, then none of that's going to happen. So yeah, I kind of go all over the place where needed.
Being in development is very interesting, particularly being in development in biotech.
Yeah.
And because that is an area where things do take a really long time. And as you said, scientists will, kind of look at you like, what are you talking about? Because there is also that sense that you're going to go from project to project. Things are going to change. Once you learn something, things change, and it feels as if it's difficult to standardize. It's hard, but I think it's incredibly important, particularly as we need new products to improve the health of the world.
Yeah, and for sure. And if you don't work on that lead time for development, especially in any branch now, it's really, really important to work with the lead time. So it was really exciting to start my lean journey there. And I learned a lot about the approach to people, especially, and the approach to standardization, and how can you take lean elements and apply it basically in anything and anywhere. I ended up even helping HR with standardization of some of their processes, and in development, looking at, project models and gates and standardization of different things, of methodologies. And that was super exciting, and has given me a good, a good background and a good ballast to have in terms of that. Because no matter which organization, which team, which production, which management group I've been in, there's always, if they're not used to working with lean, there's always this like, yeah, but we're not Toyota, so it's difficult to do lean because of blah, 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 blah. And it's always the same reasons. And I always say, yeah, but I've heard this before, and I started doing lean development, and that was possible to do there. So I'm sure we'll also find a way to do it. To do it here. So it's actually been really good to not have that really hardcore production background, because it's easier kind of to go the other way now, to go into I'm in a more of a production environment, and it's a lot easier in that way to do lean there when you've done it in all these other weird places, right?
To go in the other direction, because I think that is very typical, right? When a company decides that they're going to do lean in product development, they frequently will take their experts from their production environment and put them into product development. And then there's this sort of swimming around where they have to understand how product development is different. And the people in product development have to understand, well, a lot of the things you do, well, maybe you call them something different or you do them differently, but there are still these huge opportunities.
Yeah.
It starts with sometimes a little bit of animosity, perhaps even unnecessary pushback.
Yeah.
So you also mentioned, when you were telling us about how you got here, the Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. So I have to ask you straight off, because I don't think everybody knows, what is Brazilian Jiu Jitsu?
So Brazilian Jiu Jitsu is a martial art. So it's a self-defense system. It is what we probably call one of the most, alive systems that we have. It's constantly changing, which is really cool. It's also the safest, in my eyes, one of the safest to practice. We don't have any kicks. We don't have any punching, any striking, anything like that. So I'm sure most people at least have an idea of what judo or wrestling is, where you kind of throw people around. So we do the judo wrestling, throw people around, but when we get to the ground, we continue rolling around on the ground. And the purpose of it is to get your training partner or your opponent, if it's a competition, to give up, to tap out, by putting them in a position where they are forced to do so, because otherwise they will get hurt. And it looks and sounds very violent, because then you get hurt and you can potentially dislocate someone's arm, or elbow, or choke them unconscious. But that rarely happens, because we have such a high degree of respect and trust in each other in training and competition, that it's just as much about knowing your own limits and knowing when to say, okay, this is it, we're done. It's also the best self-defense system for women, because it's also designed to be able to handle larger opponents.
Wow.
So if you have a very, if you're skilled and you've practiced a long time, it's designed to be able to handle larger opponents. Of course, at a competition level, you have two people who have trained as long, then the bigger, stronger one, that's going to be a different case, right? But in terms of self-defense, for me, it's the best. And like I mentioned, this what we call this liveness in it, because if you train boxing or kickboxing or something like that, and you go to class, if you go and you're with your training partner that you really like, because we all depend on each other to get better, if you go all out on them and you try to knock them out in training, they might get hurt, they might get a concussion, they might not be able to come and train with you the next day. In Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, that's different, because you don't knock anyone out, and you don't have these, you don't have these, I think, even more violent strikes and things. So you have the opportunity to try all your techniques, to do the very best you can, against your training partners, and get better every day with resistance. So we don't do a whole lot of, like in karate, you have these katas that you do where you're basically standing and doing a form out in the air. We don't have that. We're also very, very dependent on our training partners. And it's through our training partners we get better. And it's through putting ourselves in situations where we're resisting each other that we develop. And for me, I think that's awesome. So that's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Some people can call it aggressive cuddling, rolling around in your pajamas, many terms. But that's also kind of to stress that even though it is a martial arts and we train very hard, we're very friendly towards each other. And most gyms, they have like an amazing friendly atmosphere. It's an amazing community to be in as well. So that's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I've trained for actually 16 years now.
Wow. So, and you've won a couple of championships in that time.
Yeah, I have. Like I said in the beginning, I started competing at a high level more or less at the same time as I was finishing university, and I managed to continue at the same time. I was also trying to build up my lean career business-wise. So I had several years where I competed and won, or at least medaled at European championships, at world championships, and and everything in between.
So there was
so
some great opportunities for travel and meeting a lot of interesting people.
A lot of travel too, because like I said, it's a good community, and several of my opponents, even though we have bitter, hard fights on the mats, it's always friendly smiles after, and some of them I'm lucky enough to call them my friends today, and get to see them once in a while. So yeah, that's good. It's been a great journey on that side.
And now you have your own academy.
And I also have my own academy. So throughout this journey of mine through Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I've also, always had some kind of lean mindset pulled into it, even when I didn't call it that. Because the thing is, when I started working after university, and at the same time I was still competing, I was trying to hang or develop myself to be as good as the best in the world. Mm-hmm. The best in the world, they train full time. So the number of hours I put in was 60 to 70% less than what everyone else was putting in. So I had to find ways and to think about and execute my training in a way that I could improve myself and get better faster than they did, because otherwise I would never be able to do that. So I always had that focus. Every chance I had at training, I always like, okay, how am I going to use this training session to get better? And in the end, that developed into my own little almost kata like a continuous improvement system of always having a certain thing that I had that I was focusing on in that session, always having certain 1 to 2 certain very tiny details, maybe nothing different than a specific way to grab your opponent or a specific small angle that I would have as the focus of that session. I would write it down beforehand. I would evaluate on it afterwards, and I would think, okay, how am I going to do this better tomorrow, or do I need to change focus to something else?
How do you then put it all together? How do you keep it all moving together as one practice?
Well, again, I would always start before the season or some months out to a larger competition. I would do an analysis of my own weaknesses and strengths, basically, and then find out what do I need to work on. So I would have an overall plan of what I need to work on, but not a detailed plan, right? The detail would be in the everyday. Okay, where am I now? What can I improve on for tomorrow? And always, one of my coaches always said this: always think about if you were going to beat yourself, how would you do it, right? So
Yeah.
that would be the weaknesses, you at least have to fix. So that, and for sure, I definitely credit that method of approaching my training to the titles that I have. I am in no way a talent. I've done sports all my life, so I'm not going to say, oh, I never, did any sports or anything like that. I've always done sports. I've never been great at any of the other sports. I've always been, in terms of competition, I've always been the kind of person who just wants to do my best and beat myself. And that has also been in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, that maybe I've won gold medals I was dissatisfied with and lost matches I was happy with because I felt I gave my best performance. But for sure, the way I improved, the rate at which I improved, and the amount of time that I actually managed to keep on competing at the highest level in the world, at the same time as keeping a full-time job and progressing career-wise, was because I had that methodology and that focus to be able to improve on. Otherwise, I would not have achieved that for sure. It wasn't luck.
Is that what you teach in your academy then?
Yeah, so my academy is a little different. So my academy is a project that was in my head for several years, but sometimes timing isn't right. And then 3 years ago, the timing was right for it, and I felt now I need to do something else, and I want to train other people and make other people good and make other people benefit from this great sport. But being an elite level competitor and dedicating all your free time to that is not necessarily what everyone wants or needs. So and it's actually only a small percent of the people who want to be able to do that.
Right.
Well, anyone can say, yeah, I'd like to be a world champion, but when it comes to, okay, do you really want to spend all your evenings in the gym and you always want to be dieting and watch your diet? That's something else. And that's okay. And Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is not, for me, like, it's not a one-sided thing that you have to just be a competitor. But, it's such a great sport for so many people, and it's such a great community, and it's such good self-development that I think it's a sport for everyone. So even though I come from a very competition-oriented background and a competition-oriented gym academy that I've trained in and I still train in, my vision for my own gym was different. My vision was that I wanted whoever who maybe has never trained before, who already has a family, has a career, but they want to do something fun, they want to learn something, they want to get in shape, they can come in. But I kept one thing that was, like, how do you say, essential to me. I want them to be able to get good at jiu-jitsu, same way I did, without thinking that they have to train every day. So in my mind, I want to make people good at jiu-jitsu, no matter their baseline when they come in, and with, training 2-3 times a week. Does that mean they're going to win worlds? No, but there's still a very, very big difference. I've traveled to so many places around the world. There is just a huge difference in how good people get that is independent of the physical attributes. So, in my head, I want anyone, I want Bella to be able to step into my gym one day and say, I want to learn Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I'd be able to open my academy, open my eyes, come say, yeah, of course. And if you come 2-3 times a week, you will also get good at Jiu-Jitsu. So that was my vision when I started it.
So that means that it really is for everybody, right? It's not. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that puts people off actually even trying some sports, is the idea, well, if I'm going to get into this, now am I supposed to be, training for whatever?
So so that was my vision with it. And then when I started it, how was that? That was, well, I think one thing, and maybe other people struggle with this, but for me, it was a huge step in opening my academy, just for the fact that, I was putting myself out there and
Ah,
daring to show up and daring to believe in, no matter how many titles you have and things like that. But it was a very big step to do that, to show up and believe that, someone would like to learn from me. And my
wow.
greatest fear in the beginning was like, okay, I'm going to show up and then it's going to be no one that comes, or some days there will be no one that comes to class or something like that. And I was prepared for that. And I said, okay, I'm just going to believe in the process. I'm going to trust the process and trust that it'll build itself. And if there are days where no one comes and I'm there alone, that's okay. But I was very lucky that from the beginning, even though I started like right before the summer holidays and bad timing, that I actually always had students, at least a few students, show up to my class. And I started very, very small, and that was
Hmm.
also fine, because I didn't want to, you can't start something huge, and I didn't have the resources for it. And I also wanted to take this kind of like scale up and experimental methodology and say, okay, how I'm going to like basically say that the first period is going to be a pilot, and have an idea, have my business model, and this pilot is going to run, but I have to try things out and see how I can build upon that. So that's how I started it. One thing that I have done, not differently from everyone, but I don't understand that not every gym does it, and I'm still probably one of the few that do it. But again, it's also all about being coherent up to my vision. So coherent and consistent up to my vision of anyone being able to walk in, say they want to learn Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and I can make them good. That also means I have to be able to take them in where they are. So for me, that meant that I made an introductory program, like a 101,
Hmm.
fixed, committed 2-month program, where if you have not trained Brazilian Jiu Jitsu before, I don't care if you're 20, 40, or 60, I don't care if you've played football before or you have done nothing, you start the same level. So you start with the basics, and you start at a very low level where I've taken out all the complexity out of it, and start with basic movements. Because a lot of people start teaching fancier techniques and things like that, but you don't know how to move on the ground. Everyone can walk and things like that, move on the feet, but a lot of jujitsu is off your back. So how do you move off your back? So there's certain movement patterns that your body just needs to understand before you get onto everything else. So one of the things, and that's the technical part of it. The other part of it is that it also, because no, even the 20-year-old who's really athletic and has done a lot of stuff, technically, when they come in, unless they've done something like wrestling or judo that's similar, they're no better than you, Bella. Like, they are no
That's hard to
better, even
believe,
though
but
it's hard to believe, but in their head, they might be, but technically, they are no better than you. And jujitsu is also a lot about humility and understanding that someone's always better than you, and there's always also something you can get better at. And that we're on the mat, we're on the same level. So by starting people in a group where you all start day zero and you know nothing, and you feel like a complete fool in the first 30 minutes, and that's okay, and you create a welcoming atmosphere saying that it's okay to be like this. You also create what is very important for me, to have a safe environment where everyone's open, and have a safe environment where we're here to learn and to help each other. And all those cultural aspects of it is also something that is then you can form when you take people in a group for 2 months at a time like this. They get to know each other. One of my instructors get to, introduced to what is our culture here of helping each other, of learning, of continuous improvement. How do we do that here? How do we train with each other? And so I had this idea that this was I was like, okay, this has to be obvious that this is the way that if you have new students, that's when you take them in. That's the way you start them up, right? You start up by, you have the building blocks. You don't produce the fanciest part of your process before you produce the the basics. The next part of it was then, I've never like officially worked with TWI, but I have worked with a lot of it wasn't called that, but in my old company with, with training methodologies and ways to train and train the trainers and standardization that were basically TWI. So I said, okay.
And we should just explain what TWI is.
Oh, yes.
Which is training within industry, and it's a very specific way of training, right? With starting out with small pieces and explain to people why they do something, as well as how to do it.
So it's both the small pieces, and it's also this one thing I've very much taken from Lean is also this, I want standards in my academy. I need to have standards in my academy. So the first thing was, okay, this 101 program that I built for new students is a standard. So what does that mean? That means that I need to document it in a way that when I have other instructors working for me, which I do, I have 4 or 5 instructors working for me, and they help me with this program as well. They need to be able to teach it the same way I do. And Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, there's a lot of variations. There are a lot of things you can discuss, a lot of things that could be better later, but it doesn't matter when you have with complete beginners or anything. The standard is even more like boxed in. So, I built this as a standard. I made videos. I have built each lesson up as its own standard and explaining the why behind each movement, and then a very specific way to how do you train each of these movements in general. So this is one of the things that I've really taken into me, and I drill it to my instructors is like, well, this is a standard. We can evaluate if after each program, we can evaluate to change the standard. If we find something better, that's great. But until we decide to change the standard, this is the standard, because that makes it easiest for us all to teach the same thing. It's a lot easier for the students to receive it, because if we run it weekly, right? So the same class that is taught on Monday is taught on Wednesday. So if you come, Bella, on Monday, you get taught one class, you get it repeated on Wednesday, which is really good, because probably, you need it a couple of times to get it. This isn't like a take 2 steps to the right and then we all know what we're doing. And by standardizing it, I make sure that if I teach it Monday and one of my instructors teaches it on Wednesday, you will have the same key messages communicated to you on Wednesday as you did Monday. And that makes the learning process for you better. So it means your development and your improvement and your learning curve will be steeper because of it. It also means that when you finish with a 2-month program and start on one of the other programs, that I and my instructors and even other students, they know what to expect from you. They know what you've been through. So we also have a standard product that's coming out.
It's coming out of this training.
Product. Yeah, you are a product. So what do I want? I want to have the best possible product after an 8-week program, and I want a standardized product. Yeah, there will be variations, because after 8 weeks, your physical attributes will be a little bit different than 20-year-olds. And then, but I want to have the same product and the same quality that comes out, because that's a lot easier than to build upon. So that's one of the things that I've took in and put it in, and the reasoning behind it, and I explain it to my instructors and even my students. I tell them, look, this is how we do this. We have a standardized program. Yeah.
So how do people react to that? I'm especially interested in the instructors, because I expect some of them have come from other sort of training backgrounds.
They react well, especially, and that's the interesting thing, especially my less experienced instructors. They're really happy about this programming, and I do it. We talked about this 101, but I have a 201 and so on. So they really like the structured programming, because it gives them, because as they don't have as much experience yet, it gives them something to hold on to. So they don't have to think about too many things. They have okay, not just, I could also say, oh, teaches techniques, but I've explained the why. So they have some of the details, they have a warm up, they have a whole sequence of things, so they can focus on delivering it. My more experienced instructors, they really like the way that this is built up, in terms of having the why behind things, of keeping it very simple, because they've seen places where you don't do that, and
it's complicated.
Exactly, and the product after 2 months is not what it could be, right? But of course, and I understand that the more experienced you are, the more it can feel a little bit more boxed in, that maybe they want to teach or show something in a different way. And I'm like, nope, we need you to stick to the standard. But all in all, my instructors have taken to it very, very well, and the market has also responded to it extremely well. I had previous to the first lockdown period, we're in the second lockdown period now, but previous to the first lockdown period, I managed to grow by like 400% in 6 months or something like that. And
Terrific.
I managed to like double up in 6 months last year as well. And I always have a very, very long waiting list for these programs. The last one sold out in 3 minutes, and my marketing budget has been zero. I'm not running Facebook ads. I'm not running Google ads. I have a good SEO placement. So the awareness is there, but I get a lot of emails. Oh, put me on the list. I heard this program is really good and it looks really good. And for me, it's word of mouth. So for me, that's worth a lot. And it's worth a lot to see, again, one thing is the 2 months, but to see the result, to see the product afterwards, and to see how fast that they also learn afterwards when they join the other normal classes and things like that. So it's worked amazingly, and it's been a fun journey too, because I've changed the standard. It's been a fun journey to have KPIs on retention rate from it, because I data driven, so you can't just like run the program, you have to have the KPIs.
I'm sorry, I thought I was going to sneeze. Now I have to write down what time did this happen and edit it out, and I didn't sneeze. Okay.
As I said, so no program and things like this without being data driven, right? So the measurable one thing is what I can see of the product quality, but of course for an academy, the measurable target is how many students stay on from this 2-month program and become a regular member. And I have that number up to about 60-70%, which when I hear my colleagues in the industry, they're like, how do you do that? So I'm doing something right. And then there's been interesting cases when it's been lower, where I'm like, okay, why didn't we do that? Well, it's not random. So let me look. And then I've, run a little systematic problem solving on what happened in that process that was different, that meant I didn't get the retention rate after. So there's a lot of things I pull in from lean, from training within industry, from kata, from having worked with strategy deployment and target setting and a lot of things like that for so many years. This part of it I think has been a lot easier for me to deal with, this business side of running and starting an academy, than many other people probably have.
How have you been able to stay connected to your community, your jiu-jitsu community, during these shutdowns?
That's just been, it's not been a good.
No.
It's just not been good, right? So in the first lockdown, I was running Zoom classes out my basement with mixed attendance. But they were happy that I did it, and they were happy to see that there was some initiative taken to that. And here in the second lockdown, I did a few Zooms, but I have not been able to be consistent with that, as I'm working on too many other projects right now to do it in terms of. I know that a few of my students really appreciate it, but it's not a huge crowd that comes in to it, because people just. This is a sport where the sport where you have the most physical contact ever, and then all of a sudden you ask people to have zero physical contact and lie around on the living room floor and do it. I'm not saying it's impossible, but so mostly I try to encourage them to stay active and things like that, and so they're ready when we can start up again, hopefully soon.
Hopefully soon. Yes.
Hopefully soon. Yeah.
Indeed. So in thinking about building this business, Shanti, you have been pulling all this, all the stuff that you've learned from lean, from TWI, kata, strategy deployment. You've built brought this onto your business. How has the academy and what you've learned in the academy, how have you brought that back into your other job?
I think so. I think actually what I have brought back from my academy into my other job has not been so big yet. Because
No?
if you look at, I've worked at a fairly high level in very large organizations, and now I'm, building my own thing and building the structures around it. So I'm pulling from the large part to something smaller now. So that part for sure has not been, how do you say, as much, has not, I haven't brought in that much. But I did bring in a lot from when I was competing in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu.
Oh, interesting.
I did bring a lot of, the competition experience from Jiu Jitsu and my approach to continuous improvement in Jiu Jitsu. I think that helped me, and I brought that a lot into the way I do things at work. I think I brought that in one thing that has nothing to do with lean, but for sure has helped me a lot in situations, because I became a manager quite young. I was, thrown in as a internal consultant to help these VP management groups, and sometimes stood there and was like, what am I doing here? And do I have the courage and guts to stand here? And every time I walked in, I would be like, well, no one is physically going to attack me or anything. And everything goes in a tempo, like everything is a lot slower than it would be in a jiu-jitsu competition. You can follow what's happening. It's not like, half a second's loss of focus or small distraction, and then you're completely off track and don't know what happened, right? The environment in a meeting room, no matter how high and how difficult the steering group is that you have or whatever, it's a lot. It's manageable. It's always manageable. So I always brought that in personally to me, to how I approach things. And I also always brought in a very much a can-do attitude, and why don't we just try this? We can always go back. And things like that, because I think that's easier to do, and that's my that's always been my training approach in general, whether it's a training in organization or training in jiu-jitsu, is, well, let's try it out and see what we learn, and not spend too much time dwelling on the theoretical aspect. Of course, there's some structure and theory to it, but let's see what happens. So let's try it out and let's see. So that I brought back, I brought into it a lot. And another thing is, everyone says, all companies and all people say they do continuous improvement. But the part about, okay, what exactly can be one little thing that you're going to do different tomorrow that could be an improvement or could be an experiment, or that you're going to try? Not that many people that I've met actually have that approach. Companies do evaluations on projects, and then it's these large, fluffy, learnings that we take on to the next project and so on. And that works well too. But for me, these small, tiny improvements, and it's not necessarily in your production process. It can be, I've done a lot of leadership coaching. So, for leaders or employees, anyone, it can be in your approach and your behavior to something. Okay, what is the one little thing that you can try and do a little bit different or a little bit better tomorrow? And that part I have, because I had it out of necessity in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and that part I've always kept with me in some way, in a lot of the things I do, business-wise or not.
So even in the case of your academy, where you're saying to your instructors, use this standard, it could very well be, what I'm going to try to do better tomorrow is to be even more faithful to the standard, so that we can
and even though we have a standard, there's always something in the way you stand there and teach something. So I do that, and I do that in training and in teaching still today. On the way home, when I'm driving home, I'm like, okay, what did I want to see? What did I want them to achieve in that class? Did they achieve it? What was my role in it? Could I have explained something better? Could I, have done something differently. So that I still do pretty much. I'm not going to say always. There's some days we just go and you don't think about it, and that's okay. But I still do that a lot at when I teach class, and I also still do that a lot at work. So at work, I'll still also do very small adjustments to, okay, how did I run that workshop? How did I run that meeting? Because that's always also going to change depending on participants. So it's all about learning. So what did I learn from this interaction today? What did I learn from doing this podcast with Bella today? How can I use that tomorrow or in something else? So these small reflections for me, I think are very, very important. Whether you call it lean or something else, but these small reflections I take into me and take with me, and that makes a big difference.
Well, it makes it easier, right? Because if you're thinking about continuous improvement and it's this huge, massive thing that you have to do, and all of these things that you have to remember. But what you're saying is all right. Well, just take a little bit of time and think about what happened and
exactly
what was the result, and how can we do it differently? How can we do it better next time?
And the same thing, I think another thing I take back from jiu-jitsu to the organization as well is this: I have to be able to receive a student into my gym, regardless of their previous experience, physical attributes, and so on. The same thing in an organization. So I have to help an organization, regardless of their attributes, regardless of whether they've worked with lean a lot before or a little before, or whether they have some resistance or not. I have to do the same. I have to be able to take them in. And the way I do that is also by looking at my lean tools and methodologies. And just like I scale jiu-jitsu down to be about basic movements for my beginners, sometimes I have to scale things down to, at work, to make it something that can be received by someone who hasn't worked with it before. So, I'm working with strategy and policy deployment, Hoshinkanryo, if you also, that I've done a lot of work, and I'm working with it now in an organization that hasn't been used to setting targets, hasn't worked with it much, hasn't worked so much with process mapping and so on. I have like a huge set of PowerPoint standards, methodologies, Excel sheets, workshop presentation, cookbooks that are standards, and I could choose to just roll them out, but they might not be ready to take that, or rather, where I'm now, they're not. So what is my job then? Am I going to say, oh, we cannot do policy deployment here because you're not ready for it? No, because they need it. But I need to start somewhere else. I need to say, okay, policy deployment in this organization this year is one thing. Next year it'll be something else because they've tried it once. So next year they a little bit more experience. I can put in a little bit more. So this year we're doing a high level VSM where I'm probably not going to get lead times on. Half the data is going to be missing. That's okay. We're going to start somewhere. We're going to do some projects. Are they going to be really, really the sharpest business cases and linked and everything? Maybe not, but we'll know it's improving something. We'll start understanding better, seeing the holistic picture, seeing how we help each other across the organization. That's what we need to do. We can allocate resources better across the organization. That's also something we want to do. Next year, we can add a level of detail. We can add a layer to it in the organization or do something. But I'm not going to not do it because the organization is ready. And I'm also not going to take this full, huge, perfect policy deployment package, strategy deployment, target setting, everything, and just force feed it and stuff it down into a group of people who have never worked with data before in this way. So,
right. They'll just run screaming in the other direction.
Yeah, and they did that before me. They've had other consultants, and when I came, they're like, "Oh, she's another one." And now they're like, "Oh, okay, no, this feels okay. This doesn't feel like I'm going to be run over, or this is going to be an Excel sheet that's forgotten in the drawer afterwards, or something like that, right?" So that part I also take.
Yeah, and you can then start to see, as you do these small things, you can start to see people's eyes light up when they suddenly realize a relationship in the organization that they weren't aware existed before, or
Exactly.
or why if you measure this thing, everything everything else will line up, and if you measure that thing, people will do the wrong behaviors, but it'll be piece by piece.
It'll be piece by piece, and they'll get, I had a workshop Friday that was with a group that a few weeks ago was resistant, but it was a wonderful workshop, and we talked about also some measurements of yield data and things, and I was like, yeah, maybe it could be a good idea, and one of the managers of the owner cohort said, well, if we use lead data from our yield data from our machines, we can maybe be better at predicting when some of the forms in the machines are going to break down, so we can send them to repair. Yeah, exactly. So that's perfect.
Yeah.
That's a data that group thinks is necessary. They can use it for something. Then we'll go ahead and take action on it. Maybe somewhere else it'll be another kind of data that they need and that they see the need to take action on, right? So yeah.
Wow. Well, Shanti, this has been a lovely conversation. I've enjoyed it so much, and I'd just like to ask you before we wrap up, thinking about a young person starting their career, what would be your one piece of advice for them?
I think that would be just to throw yourself out there and do things, even the things you think you're maybe not qualified for yet, or think could be difficult. Because actually, like I said, my career in jiu-jitsu and in business and organizations has followed and started about the same place. So back when the summer I finished university, I landed my first job that was a really good job, and I landed it by accident. And I also won my first world championships. And for me, I also did that by accident, because the job was a posting that described, my profile and what I had, but as one of the few job postings at that time, didn't say, oh, we want a candidate with 2, 3, 5 years of experience. So I thought they wanted an entry-level candidate, so I applied. At the second or the third job interview, where they told me, look, actually, we want you. We thought we needed a candidate that had, a couple of years of experience, but we actually, we're going to take you. I was like, oh, but you didn't write that. If they had written that, I would never have applied for that job. And that would be a shame, because it was a great job for me and I helped them a lot. And the same thing with that summer, I won my first world championships, and I had trained a lot for another big championship. And then I went to it because I was like, oh, well, let's see what happens. And I'm going to go visit my dad, and it's same weekend and it's in the vicinity. And then I won. But if I had been like, oh, I'm going to go because I'm going to win my first world championships there, I would have probably not dared to do it at the time. So some of my, big accomplishments in the beginning were just kind of on accident, because I wouldn't have had the courage to do it. So my advice would be just have the courage to do it. If you fail, it doesn't matter. You'll just do something else that's awesome, or you'll do it later. So just have the courage and do it.
just do it. Right.
Yeah.
Shanti Abelha, how can people contact you if they would like to contact you?
So they're really welcome to find me on LinkedIn, Shanti Abelha. There's not so many of me, ShantiAbelha. You can also find me on Facebook and on Instagram, ShantiBJJ. That's not so hard to find, because please reach out if you have any comments. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much. It's been great having you on The Edges of Lean.
Thank you for having me, Bella. Thank you.
This is Bella Engelbach, and I'd like to thank Shanti Abelha for being my guest on The Edges of Lean. What is the one small action you will undertake today to make an immediate difference tomorrow? Please join me in exploring more of The Edges of Lean. There's a lot to learn. And check out my friends in the Lean Communicators community at leancommunicators.com. You'll find more podcasts and videos with lots of great new content every week. The Edges of Lean is written and produced by Bella Engelbach. This is a Lean for Humans production.